I've heard so many people reach out to me and say, hey, I got this great deal. As a matter of fact, it's the great color, great car. I didn't even know really what I wanted. I walked into the dealership. They let me drive a few cars, and I ended up buying this great car. And I'll even get to pay it off. It looks like the loan's probably about 96 months is what they're saying. They even did a little glass etching, and they threw a bunch of extra goodies in there for me too. What a deal. I felt like I win. No, big mistake. I've heard so many stories from people, customers that have literally been taken for a ride. Stupid moves. How do people stay poor and how do people figure out and get rich? It's really about being at wealth unaliving, is making some of these biggest, most drastic mistakes that people are doing constantly, every single day. I see it, whether it's friends, whether it's family. After the fact, they forgot to inquire with me and see what's the best approach, and then they go and they end up spending way more than they possibly should have. It is literally the biggest waste of money, and that's how so many people are locked into making payments all their life on a car that just is depreciating asset and just keeps them in the poorhouse time and time again, year after year, and they never get out of it. Why? Because millionaires, billionaires, they find ways that are more creative, and they use these assets as tools, but most people unfortunately don't get it, and they look at the shiny colors and the great options that they were sold that you have to have it's a must-have option. But a lot of people just make the biggest mistake. So let's cut it right to the chase. I want to talk to you today about some of those big mistakes that are destroying your bank account or anybody else's if they're out shopping for a car. I hear these same mistakes over and over and over again. One, which is clearly a very shady operation, and I still hear it actually happens, is marking up loan rates. For example, you talk about a vehicle, it's $15,000, you find this great little used car, and you're ready to throw some money on it. They say, have you been pre-approved? Well, no, I haven't been pre-approved. Okay, well, we can do that for you. We can do some quick credit checks. We'll get you some figures for you. And then they come at you and say, look, great news. We can get that $15,000 car. We can do it for 60 months. So in 5 years, you'll have that little rig paid off, that little beauty. That's an awesome little car, by the way. If I didn't have three of my own, I'd buy that. And that's often, they always plant you and they plump you up a little bit and blows a little smoke where the smoke don't shine. But then they say, look, we can give you 8% on that $15,000, and there you go. And that's a great rate. Based on today's averages, people are often paying 9, 10, 11%, or even subpar, people are paying over 20%. So from what I can see, that's a great rate. But in a lot of cases, what they're doing is marking up that finance rate. And it's shady practice in some places. It's literally reportable. But there's cases where they might actually get their rate from their lender for 6%, but they're targeting you with the 8% on that $15,000 car in a 5-year time frame. That's $1,000 in their pocket. And so many people, I get just absolutely bamboozled. It blows me away today that people still get snookered with this. So make sure you read the fine print, and most importantly, shop around even before you go into the dealers. Check with your own bank. Check with your own lending institutions. Understand what your credit score will get you for a finance rate, and then you know you can go in there and you can negotiate and be much more sharp with getting the best rate. Another one that really just absolutely gets my goat is, we know in the last couple years, people were paying way over sticker. If you want that new car, a lot of these dealers were being pretty greasy about it, adding market fees, market adjustment fees all over the place. It almost became normal. It almost became the expectation and the new state of being. And sadly, a lot of people were just stepping up. And that's why we're in a place where cars cost so much today. People were willing to pay for that. They weren't as aggressive. People weren't sharpening their pencils, and they just weren't smart. So paying over sticker, or the MSRP, the manufactured suggested retail price. Remember, manufactured suggested retail price. That's your 0 point. And now a lot of dealers assume that you know that that's the starting point. And so you start negotiating on that. But believe it or not, there's a low water mark right here called the invoice price. And forget about the market adjustment fees. First of all, if anybody's trying to charge you any kind of market adjustment, I just run away. Like, it's not worth it. There's so many other great choices and great vehicles out there. So forget about market adjustment. It's just simply not worth it. It's a ripoff. It's a scam. And it just sickens me to see people get hosed time and time again. When I hear people are paying above sticker, that's bad enough. But even better, you should be paying much lower than sticker. You should be paying closer to invoice. Now, you won't get the vehicle for invoice, or rarely will you actually get it for invoice, because unless the dealer's selling, Stellantis products, Rams that they just can't get rid of, most manufacturers are still moving product. And as long as they're moving product, they're probably not going to give their vehicles away for invoice. Where you want to start your negotiations isn't at MSRP. You want to try to understand what that lower watermark is and what the invoice price is. Yeah, you can find that in great little resources like Consumers Reports, Cars Direct, and Edmunds are great places to do your research before you even go into the dealership so you understand what that invoice price is for those vehicles. Get that price set up, go in there, sharpen a pencil, see what it says on that MSRP or on your Monroney or window sticker, and understand what that base price is, what the extras are, and understand that. But then take it to the dealers and try to start negotiating on the invoice price and not the actual MSRP or the manufactured suggested retail price. You can usually start down here. Well, you don't want to start high because then you have no negotiation tactics. Start here. The worst thing they're going to do is say, hell no, we can't afford that. So you start down an invoice and you will wind up paying more, but hopefully in most cases you wind up paying closer to below MSRP and not above it. Another one, I went shopping once with a relative of mine, and we went into the car dealership, and I was asked to basically take a back seat and just be more of a passive, but I could not resist. And once I heard this, I literally had to take the relative to the side after we had the conversation with the salesperson, and I had to kind of tune them in as to what was actually going on. And what this dealer was trying to do was trying to sell them on all these extra widgets, these rear seat entertainment systems, the larger expanded screen on the front, as well as the larger 21-inch wheels when the 19s are just fine. And they were trying to sell all these parts and pieces that were big upgrades, and big expensive upgrades, I might add, that really didn't need to be there. But according to the dealer, they're must-haves, because this is a Honda Civic, and if you don't have that part on there, no one's going to buy that off you. And they pitch it like that. They put you into a place where you think you're going to lose a ton of money on your resale because it doesn't have this option or that feature. So they'll always hit you with that, oh, this is a must-have feature. Forget about it. I mean, unless you're driving a Ferrari or something like that, a Maserati, and they say, well, you need the prancing horse on there. You know, you probably need the prancing horse. You need the carbon paddle shifters with the LEDs. Yes, you probably need those for resale. And especially considering how much you're going to spend, $300,000, $400,000, $800,000 on a new Ferrari, you probably want to protect your investment with some of those smart purchases. But if most people aren't buying Ferraris, they're buying cars like Civics, Accords, even Rams and Ford trucks. Buy a middle of the road spec, something that's comfortable, has some of the basic amenities. I mean, that's always going to help you with some of your resale, but don't go all in with the extra set of ultra performance tires and the extra long sunroof and the extra wide, display on your infotainment system. You don't need all that extra junk, and you're just going to end up paying so much more money. Most of it doesn't come back at the end when you try to sell the car in 6 or 7 years on the resale side. Very few people care. What matters more to them when you resell the car is the condition, the servicing, and how the vehicle actually looks like it's taken care of. So forget about all the must-haves, and they'll try to bring you in with the emotional aspect and say, wow, look, you have to have that. I mean, the nicest cars I see have that spec on them. Forget it. They're there for a reason. These salespeople are there to try to pitch these products and sell you on the maximum benefit to them, not you. So the next problem area that I see, and I'll just be quite frank, and Mickey, you know who you are, a buddy of mine, Mickey, actually said that he came home with a new vehicle. He dangled the key in front of my face and said, hey, I got this great car. I didn't really know what I wanted, but I went in there and, I didn't really check on the banking situation. I didn't really know, but, they were so obliging. It was literally a one-stop shop, and I felt like they were so nice. I even got a cup of coffee in the waiting room, but I ended up buying this car. I didn't really know it, but, it's a pretty cool car. And I'm going to show you, it has all these great little options, a cool stereo system and all of that. I said, oh, Mickey, what? Oh, my God, what did you get into, my friend? Well, he said, I don't know, I didn't really know, but I just went in there, it was cool. I said, no, see, you were unprepared. So never, ever go into the dealership unprepared, because usually that just means you're going to be taken for a ride. You don't know what the invoice price of these vehicles. You probably don't know the type of vehicle you're really looking for, and they might upsell you on something much more expensive than you really need. Options, add-ons, the must-haves, which we already spoke of. Most of them aren't must-haves, but they'll try to sell you. You probably got taken for a ride, right? Did you buy paint protection film, undercoating, gap insurance, and all those? Yeah, and Mickey did that mistake too. And unfortunately, even Mickey paid or received the in-house financing, which likely, in most cases, you're probably able to get a little bit better rates in your own bank. So Mickey took it from both ends from Sunday. Overpaid on the finance rate, bought a car that actually he didn't really need because we found out later it was a lot bigger than the car that he even wanted or needed in the first place, but he was sold the bill of goods and ended up buying a car that was bigger, more expensive, and of course conversely now insurance is more money because he didn't research that either, and he's paying much longer term period on his loan with much higher payments. So Mickey got literally hosed. Sure, it's a cute car. I love the red paint. I love those 21-inch rims. It's a nice looking vehicle, but he literally got hosed. So go in prepared, understand the vehicle you want before you even go. Edmunds, go look at Exotic Car Play Place. They'll tell you some bad vehicles not to buy. As well, Easy Car Buying. There's some great vehicles on that YouTube channel as well. Some of the latest and greatest, some great reviews there. But there's lots of great resources that you can go to if you want to understand what some of these vehicles are that you're actually looking for and how to get the best deal. If you don't go in there prepared, you're probably going to pay too much. So another one now that I just can't help but mentioning is long loan terms or, loan extensions, or people, now unfortunately are just getting more in a mindset of budget, monthly budget. And that's where millionaires don't think that way. They think dollars. How much is that actual car costing me? What is the out the door price? What's the cash price? What is the bottom line? Not, I can afford $500 a month or $400 a month or $800 a month. Rich people don't think that way. Poor people do. So think more rich people. Forget about the budgeting. But unfortunately, sometimes it does have to fit in a budget, but you ultimately want to know what's the most vehicle I can actually afford, or maybe not even the most vehicle. What's the vehicle ultimately going to cost me in my loan term here? Now, what they're going to say is, most of these dealers are going to say, well, how much can you afford monthly? Biggest bazooka shot right there, because usually you don't want to answer that question. You basically say, because if you tell them, I can afford $800 a month, well, that's where the wheels literally fell off. Where you're thinking $800 a month, I can get into this car, I should have it paid off in 4 years. They'll step you into this beautiful, nice upgrade vehicle over here, and you're thinking, wow, that's a lot nicer car. And it's only $800 a month? But what ends up happening is they extend the loan term. So instead of paying it down in 4 years, they might push you out to 8 years. And then you end up paying for such a long period of time, you get hosed, and literally that's how you remain poor. You never get ahead. You're always a slave to the literal loan payments, and you'll never get in a place of financial freedom. And that's the worst part, is people get into snooker and they think, my monthly budget says I can do this. The dealers are always going to try to fit your monthly budget. I've heard loan terms up to 10 years. Think about that. You buy a car for 50 grand. After 5 years, that vehicle's only worth 20, 25. 10 years, that's a beater, man. That's $10,000 vehicle. You've lost $40,000 in 10 years, plus all the interest charges. You've ended up paying $70,000, $80,000 for a vehicle that's now only worth 10. What a brutal situation. But so many people get snookered.
I don't understand the words you just said.
Know what the out-the-door price is and try to keep your loan term payments down, but of course do it in a time frame that's more controlled. 4 years is always what I always suggest. Now 5 years is still a reasonable number. 60 months is not an unreasonable place. Don't go beyond that. Try to stay in that 4-year time frame, minimum 20% down. Don't go until you have that money saved unless you're in real dire straits. And again, remember, just keep it real. Don't exceed 10% of your monthly salary. That's a big guideline as well. If you're curious about how much car you can actually afford, don't exceed that. And then, of course, if you think you're spent too much, by the time you break that down 4 years and this much down, then you've probably looked at a car that's just too much and it's out of your budget. Maybe downscale. Maybe think about maybe even something used might be a more cost-effective way to own your next vehicle. And another place I see people often get snookered, and I've almost been snookered myself, and I've really had to challenge this, is extras. Contest the extras. You don't need all the extras, and they're always going to try to slide in documentation fee, reconditioning fee, gap insurance, all this other nonsense, fliff, flounder, flith, and you're just going to end up paying a lot more than you possibly should. So you want to challenge every one of those reconditioning fees, like seriously. In most cases, these vehicles come in, yeah, sure, they might need to go through it. Most of these places have a car detailer on board. This person's getting paid, $14 an hour. They'll have that car cleaned up within a couple, 2-3 hours. It's clean, ready to go. You think about how much that costs as wages. That's under $100 in wages for that guy that just detailed that car. Then he might have to do a couple things. Sure, they might have to do a set of brakes or set of tires, but honestly, most of that's already taken into account on the back end. When they negotiate, they've got that money already built in, the equity in that transaction, when they're taking it in as a trade, or when they're paying a lower value for that vehicle at the auction, because they know what that vehicle's worth, and they get a quick assessment as to what its reality is, what it's actually worth. So if they're looking at this car in auction and it's $5,000, but they look at it, it's bald tires, well, I'm only going to go up to $4,000 at the auction, and they get it for $4,000. They've already taken that into account. The price often, in most cases, if they're ruthless type buyers and sellers, they know already, and they're not going to go above that bottom line. So they already have this in mind, and they've already taken that profit in mind where they have to put those tires. Maybe they do a quick brake check. And then, of course, this reconditioning fee is just extra fluff. It doesn't, in most cases, come anywhere near what it takes to give it a quick buff and a polish and a new set of front brakes. These vehicles are often just about ready to go. Transportation costs, another scam. Documentation fees. Like I said, glass etching was another big one. We'll get to that later. But contest every single one of those line items. Give it a thorough look on that invoice and make sure you're not paying for something that doesn't look legit, because they're always going to try to slot something in there, and I've seen it time and time again. They tried pulling it on me as well. Omvic Insurance, which is a scam anyway, in my personal opinion. In Canada, they're going to try to tack that on there. It's not a big amount, and for somebody that actually questioned that recently, said, well, it's a small pizzly amount, but that's not the point. It's the principle. Where they're scamming you there, they're scamming you in other places too. And honestly, in my opinion, things like that are a cost of doing business. So walk away if they're trying to hit you with some of these big extras and they're not willing to take them off the bottom line. You should be contesting every one of those individual items if they don't make sense. Another big scam, I've actually heard of this happening. Now, I don't personally know somebody personally, but I have certainly heard through the grapevine, the yo-yo scam is something that's not uncommon. It's pretty much illegal in most places, most states and provinces, but dealers still try to get creative and shady and try to skate underneath the radar with these yo-yo scams and spot delivery. So what they'll do is often pick on people, prey often that people have poor credit, people that are more desperate, and what they'll do is they'll provide you with a sort of a baseline financing, a value out the door for the price. Usually it's overpriced anyway, because most people that have lower credit scores are usually overpaying for their financing and their interest charges. So they're already in a little bit of a desperate predicament. So then they get set up with this high interest charges or some other form of, cost of this vehicle that just doesn't seem practical or right. But a lot of people are feeling a little agitated and just happy that they got this out of the way. But the worst thing you can possibly do is get the spot delivery. And a lot of times what they'll do is they'll sort of get you in on this pre-approved, this dollar amount. And then the vehicle shows up maybe a day, maybe 2 days later. All of a sudden you get the phone call and they say, hey, you know what, bad news. We couldn't really finance that. We need a little bit larger deposit, or we need to up the payments a little bit, or the interest rates are actually going to be about 1.5% higher than we approved you for. Small detail. Let's just get this sorted out. But hey, you've got the car, right? It works. You love the car, right? And then they'll hit you with that and tug on your emotional strings here. But in most cases, people feel a little desperate, panicky, as well as stressed out. So they're just almost willing to pay willy-nilly. The worst thing you can do is a spot delivery. Always avoid this situation, yo-yo scams, by doing one key thing. Make sure the car is bought, paid for, licensed, and insured, and that will pretty much, 99% of the time, ensure that you're going to be locked in and there's no way to change it after the fact, and they can't go and add something after where you might feel stress and pressure to do that, upgrade that extra cost or tack on those extra fees, because that's often what they do. They come at you once you've sort of got that emotional connection to the vehicle, or the stress factor is sort of like dropped, and then they hit you with this, and then stress rises again, and you just want to you want to evade that stress, and that's what ends up happening. People just end up paying too much because they just want to avoid the stress, they want to avoid problems, they're just willing to sign on the dotted line. So avoid all of that, get it all in paper, signed, delivered, insured, registered, and you should be good to go. Another one I've been hearing about too is gap insurance. And I've seen this. I've had dealers try to hit me with this too when I'm out test driving a car. And they say, yeah, here, minor little gap insurance. It's a great value add because, in today's market of high vehicle prices, if, just God forbid, if you have an incident and the vehicle's written off, obviously the depreciated value of that vehicle is here, but you might still owe this. The bank isn't going to care about what the difference is. They want their money. The insurance company is going to only pay you what the value of that vehicle is, which is the depreciated value, but you still owe this. There's a differential that's got to be made up. Somebody's got to cough that up, and you don't want to be paying that if you don't even have a vehicle and it's been crashed and bashed. So there is a factor, and it's called gap insurance. And while it's not necessarily the worst thing to have, a gap insurance, so to speak, always there's some kind of markups, and the dealers always like to take advantage of people again. And obviously in a situation where we had some of these people paying above sticker, above MSRP and market adjustment fees, we're creating the perfect storm for these big differentials where people really needed, or they were preyed upon, to have gap insurance. And so there's markups. What I would always suggest is, if you feel you're in that predicament or there's a challenge with that, it's historically maybe a vehicle that depreciates heavily that you're buying, and possibly you didn't get the best deal on it, there is a possibility for a few years that you might be underwater. Then you may consider the gap insurance, but always do it through your insurance company and avoid the dealership. The dealer's going to put markups and add-ons, and they're going to multiply that. They have a multiplier factor 1.7, 1.9 times. Whereas your insurance company, they're not doing anybody any favors either, but 9 times out of 10, they're also going to give you a better deal on that gap insurance if you feel like your vehicle is a high risk. Another thing that I hear people sometimes talk about are extended warranties. Everybody knows, would you like to get that extended warranty, sir? Well, let's just put it this way. Sometimes it's a good idea. If you're buying that car and you think, hey, I've got this Jaguar, or I've got this Range Rover, or I've got some of these vehicles, but I like it and I want to keep driving it, but I'm not totally sure, how the reliable this vehicle is going to be. Vehicles like that are a little dicey. You may want to consider, some form of extended warranty, but I always do it through the dealership network, through the OEM or the manufacturer, and a CPO warranty. But generally speaking, the best advice is avoid all these extended warranties because you're going to pay a lot of money, and a lot of times these extended warranties are scams. And these dealers, and even if it's a third-party extended warranty, a lot of times they're looking for any weasel clause to get out of paying that for repair. So a lot of times it's hardly even worth it. But if you need to have that car and it's a pricey car that has a high risk of reliability challenges, sure, go for it. Otherwise, my number one priority, what I would say as a recommendation, would be to buy a car or a truck or SUV that has great reliability records. Again, look at places like Exotic Car Play Place over here on YouTube. Also look at other resources, Consumers Reports, and some of those other suppliers that can provide some great insight as to some of the best choices and worst choices. My personal opinion, I'll give it to you right now. I would have said Toyota Tundras and Tacomas up to about a couple of weeks ago, but we know things have been changing there too. I hate to say it. Nissan, probably one of the better trucks these days. Of course, Ford's got problems, Chevy and Dodge, Ram's got some problems. If you need to have one of the big three, Ram's probably your safest bet right now. Cheapest prices, as well as probably the least problematic, although they're not perfect by any means. If you're looking for SUVs, small vehicles, Mazdas, cars, Mazdas, maybe some Hondas. Remember, avoid some of those 1.5 turbo 4s and go with some vehicles that are more tried and true. Naturally aspirated Toyotas and Hondas are going to be a safer bet. Go with a reliable vehicle. Run the extend of these factory warranty and then don't bother and just pay as you go, because often extended warranties are just a waste of money. Another one, I almost got snookered a little bit ago. I was out test driving a Jeep. It was a Wrangler Rubicon, cutesy vehicle. I thought, hey, you know what? The deal, that seemed like the price was not bad. Sat down. They want to throw this garbage Amvic at me. They want to throw some gap insurance at me. And they also want to throw this other piece called glass etching. And I always walk away from that. I said, I'm not paying for that. And they even put it on the invoice already. I said, I'm not signing up. They said, well, it's already done on the vehicle. I mean, you have to pay for it. I'm not paying for that. And also, your price is too high. So I started chiseling them. But honestly, glass etching's a rip-off, in my personal opinion. If you want to have that extra level of security, that you have that traceability, you can actually even go to Amazon, buy a $20, $30 kit on Amazon and do it yourself. It's nothing more than just a little buzz marks on your glass. It's very simple, very easy. Do it with a couple hours on a weekend with your son or your daughter, and you can do it on the cheap. You don't need to pay for this extra garbage glass etching that a lot of these dealers put markup upon markup upon markup. It's almost not worth it anyway. You have insurance, and it is what it is. So I personally say don't bother. Another one is one that's no news, but we've all been screwed, blued, and tattooed by these before. You call in about a car. You say, hey, yeah, I understand you have this car. Yeah, it looks like you have this little Mazda truck. It's brand new, and it's retailing at, looks like $12,995. Is that right? Okay. Yeah, you do. Okay. All right, I'll be right down, and I'm going to come and check it out. All right, cool. Thanks, bye. And then you get off the phone, you get in your car, you race on down to that dealership. You're there in 20 minutes, and lo and behold, the dealer looks, oh, you know what? It was here a minute ago. Let me just check that for you. And then he goes away. These greasy guys, and they'll do this all the time. They go to the back of the room, they check it, they hide for 20 minutes, come back. You know what? That vehicle just sold, unfortunately. But we have this other great vehicle here. And the one you wanted anyway, and I had the steel rims on it. It was a regular cab, and it was a manual. This other one here is way nicer. Look, it's actually got the alloy wheels, 17-inch wheels on there. Has the little space cab, and it's an automatic transmission. Gives you a great little 6-speed auto. It's a much, much nicer truck. Has some nice extra electrical tech in there too. And yeah, I know it's not $12,995, but you know what? It's still a reasonable price at $17,800. It's a great truck. It's actually worth 3 times what that is. You'll never get your money back on that base truck. But we have this great truck over here. So the classic bait and switch has happened to me. It's happened to most of you out there probably at some level if you've called in. And it's not just about cars. It's electronics too. I've had the same problem where they say they have something to get you in the door. They scam you, and then you try to flip you with something that's much higher price. That's the bottom line. My recommendation, if this ever happens to you, don't even bother. Don't waste your time with these clowns. Just literally walk away, because that's a literal lie. And if they're lying to you right from the get-go, then they're going to lie throughout the entire transaction. And it just means you're going to get hosed. Another couple things that people just disregard are sales taxes, registration fees. And a lot of people just generally don't think about that. And just, what I'd suggest is make sure you do your homework beforehand. Now, this isn't really a dealer-specific thing, but people often get snookered and end up paying as much as their budget. They stretch it out to the max and as much as their budget can tolerate, and then they end up outside of that budget and are not able to easily afford that car anymore because there's all these extra fees. You might have a sales tax or, a provincial tax. Or even something through the state taxes. You might have 5, 7, 10% taxes, PSTs, harmonized sales taxes. Doesn't matter. There's always some kind of tax. Just know the tax man's coming. And always make sure you have that incorporated into your total budget, because it is a factor. Another one too is insurance, that I would strongly recommend you think about that first. Do your research before you even go shopping for the car. That's such a critical element. People go, their eyes get big, they buy the next car that they want, and they even do the research on the car, but they maybe forget to do the research on the insurance. And very costly insurance often comes with expensive parts. We know electric vehicles, a lot of people are finding out the hard way, insurance costs are through the roof. Or high horsepower cars. Now, a lot of insurance companies aren't even giving you insurance for cars over 500 horsepower. I'm starting to hear that happening quite a bit. As well as cars that have unique body panels, maybe aluminum panels. Ford pickup trucks might be more expensive to insure because the aluminum panels are much harder to repair. So just make sure you do your homework. A lot of people get snookered by paying high insurance rates for vehicles that they didn't necessarily know what they were getting into. Maybe consider that into the overall cost benefit analysis when you're buying your next car, because insurance costs can vary a lot, anywhere from $700-800 a year up to $10,000 a year. It can vary quite substantially, with the average being in that $1,500 to $2,000 for a premium vehicle. You definitely want to make sure that you're going to get the best deal, but most importantly, don't get yourself cornered with a vehicle that has inherently huge insurance rates packed behind it. And to cap this all off on a realistic perspective, why do people actually hate car dealers? Right there. I'm going to tell you the whole storyline. Definitely want to see that one too. Hope to see each and every one of you real soon. Catch you then. Bye-bye.